Now, Indian students caught in America as a new immigration crossfire. For decades, Indian students in the US carved out a survival strategy. They stretched part-time rules, worked long shifts at diners and stores, and also sent tuition bills home with the hope of a brighter future. But this fragile balance has now collapsed. With Washington's trade war against New Delhi escalating, student workers are now suddenly under scanner. Surprise inspections, strict visa enforcement, all of this have stripped away jobs that once covered basic living costs for these students. In fact, reports say in cities from Los Angeles to Atlanta, students now cram 6 to a flat, cut down on food and also count every dollar. The pressure extends beyond campus jobs, in fact. The OPT program, optional practical training, which was once a vital bridge to US careers, is now drying up for the students. Now, when we talk about official data, it shows that Indian enrollments have plunged nearly 30% in just a single year. And at the same time, America's right wing has turned its fire on India. Let me get you a few statements, in fact. Fox News' Laura Ingram warns that trade deals mean more Indian visas. In fact, influencer Charlie Kirk claims Indian professionals are now displacing US workers, and that's not it. Trump ally Jack Sobiek has also demanded 100% tariffs on India's outsourcing industry, branding call centers a threat now. Now, this shift, viewers, is striking because just a year ago, Republicans welcomed Indian American voters in record numbers. And today, those same voters are watching as their community is painted as an economic menace. And behind this rhetoric lies a political calculation. Tariffs on Indian goods have been doubled to 50%. This is steepest on any US partner at this point. Thousands of student visas for Indians have been revoked in the past few months. And this is even as Chinese enrollments continue to rise in the US. So for Indian students, the American dream is no longer about opportunity. It's about survival. In fact, yesterday's quiet strivers are now being recast as competitors, scapegoated in a bigger trade fight that's unfolding between India and the US, in fact. All right, joining me on the broadcast is Surendra Singh Lali, ex-advisor to the Ministry of HRD, Government of India, and also Foreign Affairs expert. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us here on News 9. Now, my first question to you is, when we talk about numbers here, India accounts for a majority of H-1B visas, about 75%. And in terms of students also, we have 200,000 Indian students currently in the US universities. And these students are pumping billions into the American economy. And still, in spite of all of that, you see a series of attacks coming, against Indian students. How do you look at that? And also, do you think there's an economic issue here, or it's more of a political scapegoating?
Thank you, Shita. It's such a pleasure and honor for me to be here. And I'm going to take this from the top and then get to your question.
Right.
Larry Summers said that Japan is a hospital, Europe a museum, China a jail, and now added to that, America 2.0 under the Trump administration, a kabuki circus. And while India now happens to be the darling of the world, which I just heard on your TV, the Honorable Minister say that the next 22 years, I'm not too sure if I subscribe to that word as the American dream from an Indian point of view. We need to shift focus. We need to live the Indian dream. I've lived and worked in the US, and I was one of the first only elected non-white to be the president of my International Student Association. So in the last 25 years, I have seen a lot change, and Trump 2.0 is absolutely gone turtle. But I don't wish to come into this discussion as an analyst. I want to come into this discussion as a parent of 3 children, out of which 2 go to university. And for the record of disclosure, they go to university in India, and I absolutely don't regret it. Shraddha, America has also changed a lot. It's not the same anymore. The way, the politicians are demonizing us immigrants, and especially accusing us Indians of taking their jobs away. I mean, if somebody wants to commit suicide or harakiri, be that as it may, 38% of CEOs in the United States are Indians. 1.5 billion in how much we donate in charity. 3 billion is what we give to the university's endowment fund. And 35 out of every 50 Indians living there are part of the campus leaders, which I was also fortunately one. So the point I'm trying to make is that I'm going to break this down into three parts. Students are there. It's going to be very tough. It's almost going to be, how the Chinese lived when they came to the United States, is what we call Chinatown, just packed like sardines in one apartment. And it's going to be very tough. But the ones who are already there, they don't need my advice. They're there. They're in the middle of a ground zero. They know how to deal with it. The ones who are aspiring to go, I must, on the basis of whatever little knowledge and humility at my command, say that you might want to reconsider, because America is very animated, it's very dynamic, and almost a circus to the world. So we don't know. Just getting a visa and landing on American soil, which used to be when I went, was it was accomplished. But now it's very dynamic. You don't know what sort of laws they're making. They could just pick you up for a parking violation and deport you. And for us Indians, two things are very important: our daughter or sister's marriage, and then is education. So people from the hinterland of India are selling their lands. Their parents are taking loans to do what? After 3 years or 2 years, just get deported for an absolutely ridiculous, non-serious reason. So yes, it's going to be tough. And all I have to say is that we need to not think inwards, because let's not think through the prism of America, like our country is not thinking through the prism of America, the way Donald Trump has been using his tariffs as a weapon. So we need to understand that there is much more to the world than the United States of America. And if we want to be successful, we have to invest in our country now. We don't want to be part of the brain drain and build the Silicon Valley or the NASA or the Lockheed Martins or the doctors or the oil companies. I can't even imagine, out of the top 10 companies in the US, 7 are technology based, which came out of a garage until, maybe what, 30 years ago. And they are $1 trillion in worth. And can you imagine them being successful without Indians? No. But once again, it's not our part of our prerogative to tell Americans what to do. It's their land, their rules. If they want to shoot themselves in the head or the foot, be that as it may.
Right, Mr. Singh, our country has a right to decide on their immigration policy. But of course, singling out Indians, putting out racist comments which are not even entirely true. I want to understand then, how does this reflect on the US-India relationship at large? Because, you must be also closely tracking this. It's a part of the pattern. You had tariffs, you had a visa restriction, and now this political rhetoric also going up.
You see, Donald Trump, let me give you context of it. He's not a politician. He has 34 felony counts, 1 conviction, 2 cases pending, 2 impeachments, and 6 bankruptcies. So the last thing he knows is about politics. He's a very transactional individual who is out to do anything just so that he can get a Nobel Prize. But that's their problem. Now, the issue is that there is in America, they have the Midwest. In America, they have the Rust Belt states, where a politician is simply smart enough to capture the people's imagination. So he is monetizing on the disgruntled Americans who are not willing to go to college or to school to build their careers, but they find us Indians as an easy target, because you also know and I also know, we've taken the least line of resistance in the last 1,000 years of our history. So Indians are very easy sitting ducks as targets, because we don't use, you look at the kind of language which, the Americans are using and the politicians are using. Our prime minister has maintained a dignified silence. The Peter Navarros and the Lindsey Grahams, they're talking as if it's some sort of a Hollywood movie and they're out to, play, shooting each other. So yes, this is going to rise, and it's going to be more tougher, because back in the 80s when I was growing up, there used to be a gang called the Dot Busters, which would simply start hitting Indian women because they had a dot or a bindi on their head. So I see now it's much more fraught, because social media is very active. The child who came in,
Mr.
killed
Singh,
himself.
really, I apologize to stop you there, but that's all the time we have for this story. Thank you so much for joining us and putting this Trump's crackdown into perspective for our viewers.